Hello and welcome to a video about Dwarf Fortress. This video is aimed as a getting started guide to anybody who is just learning to play Dwarf Fortress. Hopefully, we'll take about 15 minutes, and by the end of this video, you will ideally know how to get started with a brand new fortress. Now, Dwarf Fortress has been known for a very long time to be one of the most complex games ever made, which makes it a little bit daunting for some to get into. But I hope to remedy that a little bit and show you that it's really not that bad. It just kind of has a few quirks that you need to wrap your head around. Something else that's worth noting is Dwarf Fortress isn't really a game. It's a fantasy world simulation. It generates a very large amount of history for you to play around with, and the player kind of gets to poke and interact with that simulation in several different ways. In this video, we're going to be covering Fortress Mode, where you construct a fortress for dwarves in your generated world. Currently, Dwarf Fortress is available in 3 places. You can purchase it on Steam or itch.io. It's also available for free on the Bay12 Games website. But keep in mind, if you pick it up on Bay12 Games website, you will be playing the ASCII version of the game. Paid versions of the game have these pretty pixels for you to look at with your eyeballs. Once you have launched the game, you will see this button. It says Create a New World. We're going to click on that. And then from there, we're going to see this. Now, these are a couple of different parameters for your world. You can set how long your history is going to run, the number of civilizations, the number of beasts, the amount of savagery, but we're going to ignore all that and instead just simply click Create a New World. Now, this is going to load a little bit, and then it's going to generate our world for us. Now, as you can see, the world is generating. A lot of stats are appearing, and you can see some history being written in real time as the game flies through the years. Because we left everything on default, it's going to generate for 100 years, making us a place to stay, and a beautiful world for us to live in and explore. Once the world is ready, it'll give you a few options. It says that you can keep the world and return to the main menu, essentially saving the world, and then you can generate another world, or play now. We're just going to click play now, because it's going to speed our process up a little bit here. Then we're going to get another load screen, and the game is going to prepare the world for us to then load in and play. It's going to give us a couple of different options. The first one being Legends mode, the second one being Adventure mode, which is crossed out, and then, of course, Fortress mode. Now, because this video, we're not going to be covering Legends, we're going to skip that and simply start a fortress in Fortress mode. Then we're going to see this interesting little calendar here. This is the world actually moving time forward by 2 weeks. Every single time you set a new embark location, it moves time forward. We're also going to skip the tutorial as we're not going to be needing that here. And now we can kind of begin exploring our world. We can pan around and see all these different beautiful locations. But there's a couple of buttons down here that I need to cover first. The most important one is this: Choose Origin Civilization. Now, this gives us a list of the current dwarven factions that are alive in this world. Right here, we can see that there is some forests here, and there are these tiny little green icons here. These are elven civilizations. We can see that there are forests, we can see that there are mountains, some deserts, and some round hills, and of course this little island here is the Land of Snarling. Now, if we go over here to the other dwarven civilizations, I can click on here, and it's going to highlight this small one. Very small civilization right here. Only 180 dwarves live in this civilization. So, if you're a beginning player, you want to look for a civilization with a larger population. So if we click on the Brilliant Fountain, we can see that there's this more northern-based faction, and there are some goblins in the vicinity, as well as other dwarves. And then, of course, the Lash of Champions, which is in this neighboring mountain field right next to the Brilliant Fountain. Now, these are all pretty decent places for us to start, but I like the look of this little one here on the island. Because elves, while they can be a little bit tricky to deal with, certainly less of a threat than an army of goblins. So now we can pan around and see where we're going to stay. And of course, as I'm moving the mouse around, you can see that there's oceans with varying levels of aquifer, light and heavy. I do have a video about that if you would like to check it out. And we have various different metals and things available to us. Now, because I would like to play as this faction, just got to make sure that they're selected. We do have 2,900 dwarves living in this faction. We are going to find ourselves a spot to embark. Now, when I click, it's going to zoom us in, and this is going to let us have a very specific view of where we're going to be embarking. One thing that you really should pay attention to is your neighbors here. If you're a new player and you're just starting out, make sure that there's nothing that says tower there, or you might get invaded by an army of undead on day 12 and just get instigated before you know what you're doing. Fortunately, all we have close by are elves, and they are not hostile, otherwise they would be marked as hostile. So panning around here, I think that this is a pretty good spot. We do have elves that are a short trip to the north, but plenty of friends around, so I'm going to click on the embark button. But there is one other button I would like to show you first. These two, show elevation and show cliffs and grades. If you want to find waterfalls, you definitely want to look for something like this, because that's going to be a nice big trench for you. So there's definitely a waterfall of some sort right here. So I like this spot. I think this is going to be where we are going to settle for our first fortress. Now keep in mind, you can increase the size to ludicrous levels of the map, but while this can be tempting, I would recommend against this because it will make your game run slowly. Dwarf Fortress is renowned for its lag, and you'll never have any problems with space for building, even in these small 4x4 maps. While you can make them huge, your game may run like a slideshow. We're now going to select our location and then click Confirm. Now, it's going to give us a couple of options, and I have some saved profiles here from previous fortresses, but I'm just going to click Play Now. If you would like to watch a video on how to prepare for a journey carefully, I do have a video on that subject as well. Once you get in game, you're going to see this screen. It says a bunch of text about the area that you're in, and we're not going to worry about it too much because while it could be useful for your own fortress, for the sake of this tutorial, flavor text isn't particularly necessary. And now, immediately the game is going to be unpaused, so I recommend pausing it as soon as possible once you get in game. Then from there, you can begin panning the camera around using the middle mouse button or the WASD keys. If you hold Control, you can zoom in and zoom out, and this allows you to get a better view of things. And you zoom out by scrolling on the mouse wheel while holding down Control, and then either hitting C or E, you can move up and down Z levels. You can also do this by scrolling in and out with the mouse wheel. Now, Z levels are like layers of Minecraft blocks. So essentially, playing Fortress mode is kind of like playing flat Minecraft, but there's a bit of a city builder in there. And largely, that's what the gameplay of Dwarf Fortress is. It's learning to navigate these Z levels and keep yourself oriented. These little ups and down areas around the edge of the map, these are ramps. Ramps are how dwarves access different Z levels. If it's just a sheer flat cliff, like over here, they're not going to be able to access those levels as easily. However, they can run up and down the Z levels when there is ramps available. And if you find these ramps confusing, if you press R on the keyboard or click on this button, it will give you little arrows that will signify exactly what is up and what is a down area. So essentially, this is an up ramp when we're on the layer with it, but it's a down ramp when we're a layer above it. If I zoom out a little bit more and move up, once again, you can see this has now become a down arrow moving down. And when we scroll down, it's an up arrow moving up. So I'm going to turn those off because I don't find them particularly necessary. However, they are quite useful for a beginning player. Now, because the game is paused, which we can unpause at any point using the space bar, you may go, oh wow, I'm lost. Well, here's a very easy way to remedy this. Press F1. If you press F1, it'll teleport you from wherever you are back to the wagon. You can, of course, rebind hotkeys using this screen right here, but we don't need to worry about that yet. Just remember that if you lose the location of your wagon and you need to figure out how to begin again, just press F1. The next thing I would like to cover is looking at things in your environment. If we pan the mouse around over top of things on the ground, you'll see that there's this little pop-up window up here on the right side of the screen. And it tells me exactly what I'm hovering over. So in this case, it's a pine tree trunk. In this case, it's a piece of barley. And then it's some blueberry bushes, as well as some longland grass. Now these materials and things and sprouts that show up on the surface can be harvested. One of the first tools I'm going to show you is this button, the Gather button. Now, this is a very important tool. If you're settling anywhere that is kind of more temperate area where there are things growing, there will always be some plants and food and vegetables around that you can harvest. And this harvest tool will then cause dwarves that have the harvest job available, which we'll cover in a second, to run around and gather food and plants. And then they will put them in a stockpile once you have a stockpile constructed. Stockpiles can be found with this button down here at the bottom or by pressing P on your keyboard. Then you click the new stockpile button. From there, you click and drag, and it'll create a stockpile to that shape. Let's just build a small one right here. We're going to accept this stockpile, and we're going to select all. Now, there might be some conflicting things on the wiki saying that you shouldn't press this button, but at the current point in this game, it is safe to use all stockpiles. All stockpiles assign everything to the stockpile with the exception of refuse and corpses. But just for my own sanity's sake, I'm actually going to remove stone and wood from this stockpile, just so it doesn't get immediately covered up with boulders and wood from the trees that we're about to chop down. Now you can see the dwarves running around and gathering stuff, and they are going to bring them all over to this stockpile. They are then going to begin unloading this wagon. Once the wagon is unloaded and the dwarves are done moving things around, I'm going to show you the jobs screen. Now it seems like this stockpile filled up a little bit quick, so we're actually going to expand this stockpile. We're going to do that by clicking on the stockpile, clicking View Stockpile, and then we're going to click on this Paintbrush button, which is Repaint the Stockpile. And then from there we can simply expand the size of it so that the dwarves can continue moving items out of the wagon and into the stockpile. As this is being done, we can then click on the wagon itself, and we can see that there are now no items in the wagon, so the stockpile is full. Now that our life possessions are sitting here, we're going to show you the jobs screen. Now I can do that by pressing Y on the keyboard, or by clicking on this little hammer down here in the bottom left. This screen shows you the current assigned tasks. Now, it's very simple, right? You don't need to really mess around with the add new work details and make super specific jobs like some people may tell you, but things get a little tricky with these top three, right? You want planters, and fisher dwarves can be assigned to only specific dwarves because otherwise they'll just fish 24/7. Plant gatherers, I generally just leave this as open, and the dwarves will automatically assign the highest skill that is available to do the job, and generally they are pretty good about it, so I wouldn't worry about this screen at all aside from this. Now there are three pesky ones up here at the top that do not allow you to set everybody does this, and you might go, why is that? Well, the reason is they require specific items for a uniform in order to be used. The hunters require a quiver, ammunition, and a bow or a crossbow, and it needs the correct ammunition for either a bow or a crossbow, being arrows or bolts, which eventually you'll just have in your fort, so you'll be able to assign a few of these dwarves anyway. In fact, we may already have this stuff for it in the fortress, but we don't need to worry about hunting right now. Then there's woodcutting, and woodcutting requires a battle axe, or apparently a halberd to complete. Someone discovered that recently. Lastly, mining requires a pickaxe, so dwarves cannot chop wood and mine at the same time without some weird conflicts going on. So just make sure that your miners and your woodcutters are separated so that they don't worry about dropping and picking up battle axes and moving things from stockpile to stockpile and jobs getting canceled because they can't find their pickaxe and whatnot. So just make sure that your miners and your woodcutters are separated. You have a minimal number of hunters if you do need them. Keep your fisher dwarves specific to fisher dwarves because fishing is a very dangerous pastime for dwarves, and just let the rest be everybody does this. Or if you want to be more specific, select a few and just make sure that you do have dwarves assigned to each job. The next thing I would like to cover is the kitchen menu, and just something that you're going to want to do as a brand new player right off the bat. So you're going to want to click on kitchen, you're going to want to find plump helmets, and you're going to want to click on this little button. It doesn't really matter as to why. Long story short, you won't have enough seeds to plant more plump helmets. And now we're going to get into digging. We're now going to click on this tool. This is our digging tool, and we're going to move some stuff down into the fortress. So what we're going to do is I'm going to click on dig right here, and we're going to select the stair tool. Now stairs are pretty simple. You just simply select where you would like them to go, move down the number of Z levels you want to go, and then click build. There are some tricky techniques to get through aquifers, but we don't need to worry about that for this video because we're not going to be digging through an aquifer today. But if you would like to see my video on aquifers, simply check them out on my YouTube channel. I'm sure there's a link in the description. Now, as we move down, we can see that we've dug into stone. Now, remember, it's a good idea to be a couple of Z levels beneath the surface when you start building your fortress. And the reason for this is if you build right on the surface and you chop down trees, which we'll cover in a moment, it might leave holes in your ceiling if you're only one Z level down. So just make sure that you go down a couple of Z levels. Although we will actually have to build in this layer for some farming. Once we get down to the bottom layer, I'm going to dig out a little living space. And something that you need to keep in mind while playing Dwarf Fortress is dwarves need three things: food, beer, and beds. And if we can provide those three things, dwarves will be very happy, or at the very least, survive for more than an extended period of time. But I'm going to show you a fancy little tool here real quick with mining, because we've dug out this area here, and we've dug some stairs down to this little area, but up here, I would like to also build some space for farming, but I want him to dig out this lower area first. How can I do that? Well, if I click on the mining tool, there's this little arrow here, which can be accessed by hitting N on the keyboard. Now, this is your priorities screen, so I would like him to do this afterwards. And so we're going to dig out this little space, and he's going to complete this lower layer before the upper layer. Now, this mining is getting done rather slowly, so let's open back up this mining screen and go, well, our expedition leader here, Zuglar, isn't really doing much currently, so why don't we give them a pick as well? And let's see if we have another pick in the fortress. I'm sure we do. So, already has grabbed a pick and is now mining, and it appears that I have collided with an aquifer. Well, that's a little bit awkward. Anyway, we can simply just remove this area and not worry about it. However, if the ceiling starts dripping, we know why. This being said, we can also continue mining out this area just so that we have a little bit of space for our tavern, which is what I'm going to put down here. Very important for Dwarven society. We're also going to need a couple of bedrooms, which I'm going to put on this layer right above, which will probably also collide with the aquifers, so instead let's go this way. Now I'm going to build a couple of bedrooms here. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back up to the surface and we're going to chop down some trees. So I'm going to hit the tree chopping down menu, which is L on the keyboard. And once again, we have the same priority options open, and we're going to drag. I'm going to chop down some trees. Dwarves will then run from tree to tree and chop them down, but be careful about chopping down large chunks of trees that are very close together. It can cause some things to happen where trees collapse, and this can be rather deadly for dwarves. So just be a little bit careful while chopping down large amounts of trees. Remember how I said that dwarves need food, beer, and beds? Well, it's time to start up with beds. So we're going to make ourselves a workshop. We're going to make a carpenter's shop. And we're going to place it right here by the entrance. You can put these underground or above ground, it doesn't matter. And we're going to build this out of sandstone, because I don't really want to use wood for this. Now, they're going to go down and they're going to grab a boulder, and they're going to bring it up, and they're going to place it right here. Now that we have this carpenter shop constructed, I can click on Add a New Task, and we're going to make some beds. And I'm just going to queue up 7 beds here. So that's 7 beds queued up, and our carpenter is now going to start grabbing wood, after they're done felling trees, I assume. And then they're going to start grabbing wood and making us some beds. Looks like my planter got to the job first because the woodcutter was a little bit busy, so they're now hauling these pine trees and making beds. And of course, these beds are now being moved to this stockpile. Now, I can scroll back down to that layer where I was going to be farming, and once again, it looks like we collided with that aquifer. Well, I mean, as it is, so we're instead going to dig this way, just so that we can dig into sand more. Most maps will have either a dirt, clay, or sand layer, and all of these are perfectly suitable for farming. Keep in mind there are more effective methods of farming, but that's probably a topic for a different video. What we're going to do now is we're going to start moving our stockpiles around a little bit. I'm going to make me a seed stockpile. I'm going to do this by building a little stockpile here in the corner, clicking custom, and then I'm going to go to food, and then I'm going to go to seeds, and I'm going to click all. The next step from here is we're going to go into this barrels button. I'm going to set this button to 0, okay? Just don't ask why. Just remove barrels from your seed stockpiles. You'll thank me later. Then go to this all stockpile that we built initially, go to food, go to seeds, and click none. This will simply move the seeds down to the farming layer. Once we've done that, we can press B on the keyboard or click on the Place Structures and Buildings button and click on Farming. From here, we can then either hit P on the keyboard or click on Farm Plots, and we're going to build ourselves a nice-sized farm plot. This is going to be for plump helmets. If you would like to be a little bit more fancy, you could alternate with plump helmets and pigtails, but plump helmets are probably the most important crop for a beginning player in Dwarf Fortress because they are brewable into alcohol, and dwarves will eat them raw without complaining too much. Now that the farm field is ready to go, I'm going to click on it, and we have 4 seasons worth of planting here. You can worry about fertilizer if you want to be fancy, but I would say don't bother. You can add plump helmets, then go to summer, add plump helmets, then go to autumn, add plump helmets, then go to winter and add plump helmets. And dwarves will come booking it down into the fortress and plant all of your plump helmet seeds that you have available, or in this case, plump helmet spawn, because that's the correct name for them. Task number 1 is done. The next task we need to do is we need to make bedrooms. Now, because I've got this nice little area cut out here out of this stone, we need some doors, and we need some properly dwarfy doors. So I'm going to make a stoneworker's workshop. Now, stoneworkers' workshops are where bricks are made, which cuts the size of boulders into quarters and makes them way lighter and makes your constructions more efficient for walls, but also is a really good spot for making furniture. Of course, I could make this furniture out of wood, but stone doors are a little bit more dwarfy, shall we say. So I'm going to queue up stone doors. Now, if you want to be fancy with your stone doors, this is just a repeating button, which just makes the job repeat. If you want to be fancy, click on the magnifying glass, and then you can select a specific material. I'm going to select chalk, just so that they're all the same color. While that's being done, I'm going to scroll back down to my bedroom layer, and I'm going to press B on the keyboard. Then I'm going to click on furniture, and we're going to grab our beds. Now I have several different options here. I can use the closest material, which will just use whatever is nearby, or I can select material after placement. Because I don't really care about the materials my beds are made out of, I'm just going to click all of these and just bring them as they are closest. Then, once some doors have been made, they will start showing up in this stockpile, and we can place those as well. So I will continue once my doors are ready. Now my doors are ready to be constructed, so again, we're going to hit the B key. We're going to open up the structures menu. I'm going to click on doors, or doors and hatches, click on doors, and we are going to place doors in all of these locations. Now, the dwarves will just sleep in these beds, and they will be happier for just having beds. However, if they can assign them as their own personal bedrooms, they will be even happier. So I'm going to go to the zone tool, which we haven't explored yet. The zone tool are for various different room types. We're going to click on bedrooms, and then I'm going to click on multi. And then I'm just going to click and drag because there's doors on these bedrooms. The game automatically detects that these are bedrooms, and then we can create bedrooms. Then the dwarves will just simply claim them as they sleep in them. As you can see, this dwarf now feels blissful after sleeping in a good bedroom versus this dwarf that sleeps without a proper room because were asleep while I made it and haven't claimed it yet. The next and extremely crucial step that I'm going to cover also includes zones. We're going to make a pen and pasture. Every fortress starts off with a couple horses and donkeys or things that pull your wagon. Maybe if you're very lucky, you'll get elephants. And lots of creatures in Dwarf Fortress are grazing. Now, grazing creatures need to be pastured in a pen and pasture zone. So I've queued up this pen pasture zone right here, and I'm going to click on this little plus symbol with the bunny rabbit on it. Then I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to add our donkey, our camel, our horse, and also our sheep. These are all of our current grazing animals. The game doesn't really tell you anywhere, so I would recommend referencing the wiki if you're confused as to whether or not an animal is grazing or not. But long story short, if you see them wandering around with the little hungry symbol above their head, they're probably grazing, and you should probably pasture them somewhere. There are two more things I would like to cover in this video, and that is taverns and brewing. The first thing we're going to do is taverns. So I'm going to scroll back up to where these two workshops are, and we are going to queue up some tables and chairs. Lastly, we're going to go over to this workshop, and I think we're going to make chairs at the workshop, because I kind of like the way wooden chairs look sometimes. We're going to make one chair for each table that I'm constructing. And from that, we are going to then go back down to our large area that we've carved out down at the bottom. Now, dwarves need meeting spaces. Meeting spaces allow them to socialize and make friends. Without this, they kind of become depressed. So we have to give them a space that is sort of public where they can spend their time. Now, we're going to do this by making a tavern. And the way we're going to do that is we are going to make this meeting area zone and cover this area that this dwarf is currently digging out. Of course, we can expand this later by using the repaint tool. From there, we are going to click on Assign a new or existing location to this zone. We are then going to add a inn/tavern. Now, the inn/tavern will automatically get visitors, which maybe we don't want in a brand new fortress because they just show up and drink all of your alcohol. So we're actually going to set this to citizens and long-term residents only in this middle button here. Now, as you can see, immediately all the dwarves are down and in the tavern, and they have this socialize job. If we go to this other screen that we haven't looked at yet, which is the units screen, we can see what everybody's currently doing. And no job means they're literally doing nothing, and socializing is considered a task that they have to complete. It's something that they have a need for. They need to socialize and speak with other dwarves and make friends and have a good time. Otherwise, they get quite depressed. Now we're going to quickly expand this zone because I didn't quite fill it out enough. And then from here, we're going to start brewing alcohol. Now, I personally like to brew alcohol in my taverns, especially because, they'll have little spaces to sit with these chairs that we are placing in the tavern right now. And then they'll just be able to drink their alcohol in the tavern. So what we're going to do is we are going to go to the farming tab once again, and we're going to build a still. Now, this still is just going to be built out of the nearest material, which is going to be a piece of chalk, and we're going to see if we can get that last table in. Yes, now we can. So this still, in order to brew alcohol, requires a plant that can be brewed into alcohol, which is many things that can be harvested from the surface, like I showed you at the beginning, or plum helmets, which we are growing, or any other number of underground crops. But currently, we don't have any empty food storage items, which means there's nowhere for us to put the brewed alcohol, which means it's probably a good idea for us to go make some barrels. Now, there are a few alternatives to barrels. You can make rock pots at craft store shops. You can make metal barrels. I think you can make glass barrels, but that's probably a topic for a different video. Right now, we're just going to make a couple of these barrels. I could set up a repeating task, which would just make barrels until they ran out of wood, but I think for this beginning fort, it's just easiest to just create a couple of barrels. Once this dwarf here has made the barrel out of the pine logs in this instance, then we're going to check back in with our still and make ourselves some alcohol. Now that the barrel has been constructed and we can see them popping up in our stockpile, I'm going to scroll down to the still. And let's see if we can make ourselves some alcohol. Looks like we have some plants that are brewable. So we're going to brew drink from plant. They're going to go grab whatever plant is brewable, probably something we harvest from the surface. Nope, it's some plump helmets and a pine barrel. And then the dwarf is going to make alcohol. So, in this video, just to recap, we've covered the job screen, so you can assign jobs to your dwarves. We've covered brewing and farming and basic survival techniques for your dwarves, as well as making furniture and mining. We also covered the basics of scrolling around the map, and now we've made alcohol and we are farming. Which means because we'll be farming throughout the year, even on the off chance that this river freezes, then we will be able to keep making drinks for our dwarves and not die of thirst. There is one more thing I would like to show you, however, and that is necessary because we are fishing. In order for dwarves to be able to consume fish, you need a fishery, because they won't eat unprepared fish. So I'm going to place a fishery right here, and this is maybe the simplest thing you can do in Dwarf Fortress once you're fishing, because they will just automatically go prepare raw fish, and then they become edible, and your dwarves will eat them, and your food counter will go up. If you've made it this far into the video and you've followed along, consider yourself prepped and ready to be a beginner Dwarf Fortress player. Expect much fun and failure, but that is part of the game, as you will learn from your failures and hopefully increase over time. One more final tip: when you are finished with a fortress, my recommendation is to retire the fortress or abandon the fortress and then create a new fortress in the same world. I know that there's always the temptation to simply move on and generate a new world. However, if you abandon or retire your fortress and then make a new fortress in the same world, only abandon it if it's in an utter peril, and you're playing as part of the same faction, your old dwarves may show up at your new location and continue stories and allowing threads to really kind of form from fortress to fortress. And that's really what gets those story juices flowing, like you hear the Addams brothers talking about. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you'd like to see more like it, I have many, and I hope to see you in the next one.